So we're now going into another set of practitioners who have been active in defending against generative AI attacks, and they're going to tell us about their current experience and how they were able to tackle some of these scenarios. We have Jeff Wilson, who is the VP of a company called Glasshouse Systems in Canada. Jeff has been there for, I believe, for several years. But before that, he was with IBM as well as Hewlett-Packard. He was in charge of fault-tolerant systems and had global responsibilities. And we also have Jeff Gardiner, who's a former CISO, who's got over 2 decades of cybersecurity experience, has been active in academic circles as well as the military, and of course has a deep experience in the matter. So with that, I thank you for being here. Thank you for preparing a very specific topic for us. And please go ahead and take it over.
Jeff, you're on mute. Jeff, you're on mute.
There. Now, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. And that's a poor start. It'll get better from here. I'd like to thank you, Yuta, for inviting us. And we've got about a half an hour here. And so I'll move quickly through the agenda. So as I start off, I thought it would be kind of fun to use a little bit of generative AI. The picture to our left is developed from DALL-E, a OpenAI subsidiary, and I put in the search 2 women playing chess with a computer in the style of Vermeer, and that
Jeff, I don't think you're sharing your screen. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh my gosh. There. Are we good now?
Yes. Perfect.
Yep. Is that working?
Yes.
Good. Excellent. Okay, so now you know what I'm talking about. It's 2 women playing chess in the style of Vermeer. So here's our agenda for today. There we go. Since reading the author Yuval Harari's article in The Economist recently, he argued that AI should be required. It should be required by law that you declare that anything that is created by AI has to be declared. And I'm going to say that everything in this presentation was developed by Jeff and I, aside from these 2 pictures that were created on thispersondoesnotexist.com. So these are completely fictional folks. By the way, that book by Harari, the article in The Economist is superb. He was the author of Sapiens, which was a watershed book for me. In short, our agenda today begins with me providing a quick introduction to GHS, just to tell you who we do and what we do in cyber, followed by very high-level perspectives in terms of the big focus points for the industry today, so that we have a foundation from which to talk about what we do in generative AI. And as Yuta mentioned, I'll be followed by Jeff Gardiner, a CISO, both in university and financial services, and now works with a whole range of Glasshouse clients on their cybersecurity programs. So that's the real picture of us, as you can see. And we wanted to kind of throw out up front, our narrative, which is that AI is neither categorically good or bad. It's just simply another tool, and it has both good and ill. And Jeff will go through that in some detail. So here's, I won't dwell on the company, but I just did want to give you a sense of who's talking. We're about a 30-year-old technology company based in Toronto and Chicago. We do these four things, which is infrastructure, managed services, cloud, and a huge emphasis on the fastest growing of our businesses, cybersecurity. We've always been in the enterprise and the data center. As an interesting kind of corporate history, we made our first sales and encryption technology to the Federal Reserve in the U.S. And our founder actually sold to Alan Greenspan, which was kind of an interesting starting point. We have about 110 employees now. This slide's slightly dated, and about a quarter of those folks are in cyber. They range from our SOC team, L1 to L3, analysts, senior consultants, network security specialists, some PhDs to do research, one of whom actually is engaged in postdoctoral work in the application of AI and accelerating cyber response and remediation. Our focus is really providing end-to-end security services to largely mid-sized clients. Some examples would be we work with a regional global manufacturer of car manufacturer, a subsidiary of MasterCard, a number of universities, hospitals, municipalities, retail, and some legal customers, for example. I think we're best in class. If I was to pick one thing that kind of differentiates us, it's threat modeling, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So here's what we do, when we're talking about how does generative AI affect what we do, I thought I'd quickly kind of characterize what we do in a pictorial sense. So at least from the SOC standpoint. So if we're looking from left to right, we consolidate many sources of threat information into threat intelligence. And we apply that kind of strategically, operationally, for instance, with tactics, techniques, and procedures, and tactically, using IOCs and the specific context in which we're working. That helps us dynamically create models that run analytics. And finally, if we're already over to the right-hand side, basically what we're doing is providing proactive prevention guidance to our customers. An easy example of that would be the triggering of an alert that the model is calculated as high probability of an event, and detection work. So that's what we do, and we start from the basis of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then develop a specific model for customers. So where's the AI? And I what I wanted to kind of point out without going into this, but it's a nice framework from IBM that kind of points at the places in which there is accelerated investment and industry focus. Those could be broadly characterized as threat management and data protection. And it also gives us some examples of how that is changing. So, for instance, in endpoint, we see AI, going from the standpoint of having kind of signature-based endpoint to a stealthier approach to now almost all of the endpoint solutions are AI enabled. We have that in all of the SIM tools that we use. All of those have moved from kind of first gen to now very sophisticated IA-driven solutions. And if we, I picked out IBM here because they declared it specifically, but 100% of their security products have embedded AI. And my view is that probably Microsoft and CrowdStrike and Fortinet and Palo Alto are exactly the same. So everywhere there is AI and ML, but want to, kind of cut this in half between traditional AI, which is what I was just talking about a moment ago, that helps us identify patterns, make decisions, analyze classified data, detect fraud. And the second piece is really what Jeff will be talking about, which is generative AI. So you have a sense of what we do and how we defend and assist our customers defend both proactively and reactively. Now I'll turn it over to Jeff to talk about then how generative AI is used both by our team and by the people that are or organizations that are the offensive bodies.
I'm going to use the generative ability of AI to create content as an example. So if you think in the last number of years, where phishing evolved to spear phishing, and spear phishing still was pot-marked with poor grammar and whatnot, I remember having a conversation with a VP of academics on the issue of spear phishing, where they were astounded that the phisher actually spent time to get their signature block and tailor an email to them to try to convince them that the email was not coming from an anonymous source on the internet. And the idea that there was any work was done whatsoever to make phishing look anything but an anonymous was astounding to them. I went to ChatGPT and I said, create for me a poem using iambic pentameter, which is a metric, to describe the use of AI as a malicious phisher, and it wrote the poem on the left. So it was able to create a poem in circuits deep where knowledge forms its stream. Generative AI, a poet's art, does gleam with code and data, creativity sway. It weaves this verse, the words in perfect play, and silent code, the poet's dream take flight. So that was ChatGPT giving us the poem. Now, similarly, I asked it to give me, I said, I imagine that I'm a CFO and I want to ask my CEO from some account information, but I don't want to look incompetent. What would you suggest I say? And it created the email on the right. I'm working on maximizing returns for our biggest client. Could you please provide me with the account numbers from our financial records? I may have copied it incorrectly. Your assistance will help ensure these financial transactions are accurately documented. It's got no spelling errors. It's got no grammatical issues. It looks very convincing. And this is the use of generative AI to actually do something as mundane as phishing. It can create content that is very convincing. Next slide, please. More frightening is generative AI can actually write code. So I asked ChatGPT again as an example, and there are a number of publicly available generative AI engines, but I said, could you please write me a simple hello world program in C++? And this is kind of a first year college exercise or a first year university exercise in learning C++. And of course, it spat out hello world program in C++. And you can ask it to do much more complex things than just this, and it'll be equally capable of generating more sophisticated code. Imagine asking a generative AI engine to show you a code snippet that employed a common vulnerability or reported vulnerability. It's certainly able to do that. And when you run this program, says ChatGPT, it will display hello world. And similarly, if you use generative AI to do something more malicious, like give you a code snippet that actually shows you how to exploit a known vulnerability, it'll just as happily spit out that code. So these are some of the examples of how the ability to generate content using AI could be misused. Next slide, please. The same thing can be said of the technology in terms of its ability to be used in a positive way. So, for example, I asked ChatGPT to give me a 500-word essay on the risks of AI machine learning and cybersecurity, and it did that. And I took that text and I submitted it to Unicheck. And Unicheck has the ability to tell you whether content was generated by AI, and it gave it 100% score. And same with Originality AI. Originality AI also gave these 500 words 100% score. Yes, this was written by by AI. But you might think to yourself, are there strategies for trying to trick these artificial intelligent generative engines in terms of their ability to detect? So for example, can we retain domain specific details? Can we rewrite the message using tone to try to trick it? Can we paraphrase, or can we resequence the content? I tried each of those things and they were still able to detect that the text they were given was written by AI. So it has its uses also in terms of managing risk and safeguarding the enterprise. Next slide, please. In terms of code, increasingly generative AI is being used to do code reviews and code analysis. It's being used to generate code. It's being used to generate bug detection. And I have an example of that in a minute. To detect anomalies with the code or do user behavior analytics. So generative AI can look at a bit of code and quite accurately predict user behavior based on that. Next slide, please. So here's an example. I went to Google and I said, give me an example of a vulnerability in C++. And it gave me an uninitialized variable. In this case, the variable is the current minimum variable. So this is an example of a vulnerability. And I took that to ChatGPT and I said, do you see anything wrong with this code? Next slide, please. And this is what ChatGPT said. It said, the code you provided appears to be a function, min-val, that's meant to find the minimum value in an array of integers. However, there's a potential issue with the code. So not only did it detect the code, it detected where the problem lied. Next slide, please. But it did more than that. It also told me how to fix the issue. It said to fix the issue, you should initialize the variable current minimum to a large value before entering the loop to ensure that it starts with a valid value. Here's an updated version of the code. So it improved upon my code. It identified the issue and it improved upon it. But this raises another issue. Next slide, please. When employees interact with generative AI, they provide information to the platform, and the platform isn't just trained on documents freely available on the internet. It's also trained on the input that it receives. Samsung noted that some of its proprietary information was being suggested by ChatGPT, and they realized after an investigation that because employees were feeding ChatGPT proprietary information, ChatGPT was learning from that and feeding back its responses to other people. And so the company prepared an internal policy that said, until we understand the threat, the risk here, we're going to prohibit our employees from using ChatGPT to do to work on proprietary information because it represented an unanticipated data exposure. Next slide, please. More concerning, however, is Amazon has proprietary programs or proprietary methods that look at consumer behavior. When somebody from Amazon asked a generative AI engine to produce something similar, it almost spat back verbatim their own proprietary format. And so a number of other large companies have had concerns about unanticipated data leaks because of generative AI's ability to learn from its input. And it does indeed learn from its input when employees use it. So where does this leave us? Next slide, please. Gartner has what they call the hype cycle. And the hype cycle is a way of understanding how new technology gets adopted into mature usage. And in Gartner's hype cycle, they have 5 phases. Technology trigger: when a new technology emerges, people get excited about it and they ask the question, what can this technology do for us? The peak of inflated expectation, because new technology often represents capabilities that are not poorly understood. People have inflated expectations about the utility, the use, and the limitations and constraints on that. And so there's a peak of inflated expectation. And once people realize that new technology isn't a silver bullet or can't do everything that perhaps they initially thought it could do, they enter this trough of disillusionment where their expectations have not been rewarded. And then finally, when people start to understand the true limits and capabilities of technology, they enter the scope of enlightenment, at which point the technology enters into the plateau of productivity when it actually contributes to an organization's going concern. So the question I want to raise is, where is generative AI in the Gartner hype cycle? Next slide, please. Well, I asked ChatGPT, and this is the answer it gave. It said, as of my last knowledge update in September 2021, generative AI systems like ChatGPT were in the peak of inflated expectations phase of the Gartner hype cycle. These systems had garnered significant attention and excitement due to their remarkable capabilities, blah, blah, blah. You get where it's going. This is not an unreasonable answer from ChatGPT. So the question I guess the question we leave is how do we employ generative technology in a productive way? How do we manage the risk associated with generative AI? And next slide. I think it's back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to summarize with this. Again, this was a DALL-E generated graphic, but you know, for us, really, there's no excuse as to this being a paradigm shifting technology. It doesn't really matter where these threats initiate. You know, could be nation states or criminal organizations or AI. It still is, you know, the same paradigm of those foundational tenets of cybersecurity risk management. So that those tenets remain the same, you know, with or without AI, and so that's the formal part of our presentation. I noticed there's something in the chat, but want to open this up. It's just administrative. If there's any questions or anything you have of either of the Jeffs here.
Any questions?
Any questions? I have a question. You are both in the trenches, working both for Glass House's defense as well as your clients. And you did mention some of the major vendors, and we all know they obviously pay attention to what's happening. Any early indications of where they're at, how fast they're going, which are some of the most promising initiatives they're taking? We did hear this morning from AWS and Microsoft, and you are working most probably with the major cyber vendors. I'm curious about your interaction and your requirements or your requests from them.
Jeff, I can handle this. I can take this one if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead. And I have a couple thoughts in terms of this too. So go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the big companies are investing a lot in the technology because it can be incredibly useful when you identify its correct use. The risk management piece of this, risk management is really how do you protect your information assets? And the challenge is no different than when organizations started moving to the cloud. Like if you think about before cloud technology existed, as an example, information assets existed on-prem. And then all of a sudden we had this new model of deploying technology where organizations would transfer their intellectual property from on-prem into the cloud. The risk management piece was how do we still protect our information assets, and they had to work through how that works in a shared management model. This is very similar. If we're going to use artificial intelligence to generate content, the question remains the same. How do we track where our data is flowing? If it is flowing into a service provider that provides these type services, how do we demand as consumers the ability to exercise our information custodial responsibilities? So I see the parallel between moving data into the cloud, the same as I see the parallel between moving data into generative AI. And as consumers of service, our demands to the service providers should be the same. And that is, we still have a custodial responsibility to safeguard the privacy of the information, the integrity of the information that we're sharing with you. What are your risk management models that allow us to do that?
And maybe naming some organizations specifically. I think there was a tremendous amount of hype or not hype, but interest and enthusiasm over the latest generation of Sentinel, which they showed at the launch earlier this year. That's the Microsoft SIM, and so we've seen a tremendous amount of investment by Microsoft and a tremendous move forward. So I think that's a pretty exciting product, and their whole paradigm, which is completely cloud-based, is one to be watched as emergence into industry leadership. That leads us to some of the other organizations. IBM has been in the AI ML business for as long as anybody can remember. I can't say that they invented it, but they spent a tremendous amount of time in investing in this, more an early pioneer. And I think we're seeing some of the output of that now, and certainly in terms of their focus. And I'll put it in two ways: one in terms of R&D, and one in terms of marketing. Their R&D has ramped significantly, and that's been put right into the product plans, and their marketing is completely dominated by AI, not just generative AI, but AI across the board. Other vendors, I think, are quieter, but are making heavy investments. I mean, we work with all of them that you might think of: CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, Fortinet. All of them, they're in deep trouble if they're not investing in this field. And from what I can see, each of them are making heavy investments. But when I said what I see, this is emerging so quickly. The speed of this is progressing so quickly that in 6 months' time, for example, OpenGPT is clearly the leader, probably both in terms of performance, accuracy, and in terms of users at 180 million. Will it be like that 6 months from now? It's a hot market, and we'll just see how how the R&D that's being spent now delivers into products. And my last point on this is something I read in preparation for this: is that 2/3 of all VC money is applied in 2023 in technology to AI-related projects. So I think you're going to see innovation not just keep at the breakneck pace that it is, but accelerate. Is that a thorough answer, Yuta? I'm going to say yes. Anyone else have any questions of Jeff or I?
Yeah, I was trying to get the microphone to work, Jeff, but I'm on right now. Any other questions, please? If not, I have a very short follow-up. Please go ahead. Anybody in the room? You did mention 2/3 of the money is going into AI. Have you seen any new startups approaching you with the latest toy that you should absolutely try this week before your competitor tries it?
Well, I guess tongue-in-cheek, I would say daily. So we're very tapped into the Israeli innovation market. We'll be hosting a delegation going to Cybertech this year, and the number of little niche, specific problems being solved by startups, not just in Israel, obviously, but across the board it's almost astounding, and we're having to be disciplined about how we review these technologies, see where they fit. Many of them, are overlap, and some of them, though, deliver quite unique capabilities. I'm generalizing here because there's a lot of problems to solve in cybersecurity, but I would say the main driver is the embedded AI that's in these products. I give an example that that we just signed up this week, a startup, a pre-IPO organization that does ongoing basically pen testing. So it's not just machine pen testing. It's got a little different flavor to that, but as a metaphor, let's call it that for this purpose. And it really it couldn't have been built, this product even 2 years ago, because of the advances in AI ML.
It's tough to keep up, but I find it fascinating every day, right? And that keeps us entertained and engaged. So with that, thank you both very much for joining us. I think you're in Canada, right?
Yes.
And it's a couple hours earlier over there, I think. But
and at least 30 degrees colder.
Oh, nice. Okay. We're on our way. Anyway, next time we'd love to have you with us in person. And again, thank you very much for an informative session and for all the insights you shared with us. With that, we'll applause for Jeff and Jeff.
Thank you. And I am sorry that we're not there in warmer climes and in person. It was only a personal conflict of mine that I'm not there. So I wish you great success with the rest of the day. Thanks
again. Thank you very much.